All right, everyone. We were waiting. We have a guest joining us. It seems he's running a little bit late, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And hopefully he joins us. And if not, we have another guest already here. So we'll be have a really great conversation today. So in this conversation, we're diving deep into the manufacturing sector, specifically examining how AI, robotics, and automation are driving the future of production and workforce readiness. And I'm Mary Lockwood. I'm the executive director of Rogue Workforce Partnership, and we are the host of this summer-long series. In July, we'll be talking to executives across the Rogue Valley about these important topics. Today, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to keep everyone muted and your videos off except for our guests. But you can feel free to chat in the chat, ask any questions you might have there. We have team members in the chat monitoring those. And at the end of this, assuming we have time, we will open it up for questions, and our team members will share those questions. So, in today's conversation, we are speaking to Ned Ford, and Ned is the Chief Operating Officer at Harry and David. And as we all know, Harry and David is a premier food gift producer and retailer operating nationally, but centered right here in Medford, Oregon. And as its Chief Operating Officer, Ned is responsible for leading and executing food manufacturing, gift assembly, fulfillment, and financial operations. And perhaps fittingly for his work, Ned is a self-described chocolate lover. So welcome, Ned.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then we also have Grant Loberg, and Grant is the Chief Operating Officer at WorkSharp. WorkSharp is a family-owned and operated business that's manufacturing sharpening tools and knives in Ashland since the 1970s. As its Chief Operating Officer, Grant is in charge of several teams working on finance, product development, engineering, and more. And in his free time, Grant is an outdoor enthusiast who enjoys hiking around the Rogue Valley. So welcome both.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, great. So Ned, let's just dive right in. So you're running operations where the product is physical and the work is hands-on. So while we called this series the Summer of AI, just to keep it pithy, we're
hmm
actually talking about the whole spectrum of modern tech. That's robotics, automation, and AI. So in your world, if you have a wasted pear harvest, it's really expensive. So
hmm
before we dive into the tech, let's start at the beginning. What was the specific problem that made you think, okay, you know what? I might need some advanced tech here to make this thing work.
Yeah, I think our company has kind of approached AI in a lot of different areas. And so whether it be within the marketing stack to our website to our customer service centers, et cetera. So my comments today will mostly reflect on what we're doing within sort of the manufacturing and agricultural space. Um, well, one of the things that, as we were diving into it, is also realization that AI in some form or fashion has been around for a long time. And some of the stuff that we've been kind of long term been inside with machine learning and different things, but with the way that technology is rapidly developing, there's been some new developments over the past year, I would say, that kind of, to your point, had that aha moment. One in particular is we've been able to bring in a set of tools that does what I would call more process diagnostics or predictive modeling. And if you think about everybody has a myriad of data that they're pulling information in from many times, many different sources, very complex processes. And what we found is that with our standard sets of reports tend to be what I would call reactive. You read a report, you see a problem, you go fix the problem. And what we're finding is that the tool sets that are now becoming available to us allows us to do more process diagnostics, meaning mapping out the different steps of the process as it moves through the different pieces of the puzzle, but also AI and the learning aspects, the algorithms that are working behind the scenes are now also, I call it kind of sort of the canary in the coal mine. Now we're able to be more proactive and going out and start to see the system bringing back information that says you don't have an issue, but with some of the indicators that we're seeing, you will soon have an issue, and which allows us to go back into the system and correct issues before they actually become what I would call a customer-facing issue. And at the end of the day, our jobs here from an operations lens is to ensure that that seamless experience for the customer happens from the time they make an order to the time that we deliver it to them. So for me, it was that aha moment of really being able to see how the information in a complex world is being synthesized down into something that's more tangible and more actionable, something that we can go back and see and actually fix.
That's really great. So it's made you more efficient, it sounds like. Where do you see it
Yes.
falling short? Like where is Harry and David not adopting modern tech because you still need those, the people doing the work as they've done for a long time now?
Well, I think it's like anything else. I mean, there's no single answer. There's a lot of different areas that we talk about. For instance, it seemed like overnight, a lot of our vendors all of a sudden had an AI offering. And so some of it is just calling through sort of the marketing speak. I've even had vendors who've changed their web domain from .com to .ai. And so you start to see this and trying to really get to, what are really the solutions that can deliver value. There was a lot of bluster about how AI was going to replace folks. We have not seen that. We see a lot of what we're seeing is it's enabling us to kind of up our game and to really get after problems more in advance, like I mentioned to you with the process diagnostics. Um, we are still finding, at least within our four walls, that technology is still being integrated into these different processes, and there's still a maturity cycle that's happening. And I've found a lot of my peers, you can spend a lot of money really quick and not show any value to the end customer as a result. So for us, it's like anything. We have to do our diligence and go through and take a look without getting sucked into sort of a, oftentimes I say you oftentimes will have a tool or a hammer, you have the solution, and you go looking for a problem. So part of it is taking a step back. Our processes here at Harry and David are very manual from the time that, in the agricultural field, but even building a gift basket. And why is it so difficult? Well, it's the myriad of different, the complexity of a gift basket. You're talking between 10 and 25 different components that go into it in a certain position, and the variety of different things. One day you'll be, packing out moose munch, and the next day you'll be doing a full gift basket. And so that variety also, we haven't found anything that really kind of does that and takes over that. What we have found is behind the scenes, a lot of the systems, managing processes, managing orders, managing, the information flow. There's a lot of workflow steps that can actually be accentuated through AI and being able to go in and allow us to get to those issues and the problems faster. And I think that's where we've seen a real enablement for us.
Could you tell the story, Ned? So when we recently met, you had two great stories about how you at Harry and David are using tech. One was how a pear makes it from the tree to the packing facility, and you said you scan the pears at a certain point, and then a human
Mhm.
actually looks at them. And then you had another story about how you manage water in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
orchards. I'd love for you to share. Those are both examples, maybe not. Maybe they are AI enabled, but in any case, it's modern technology that Harry and David is using to really, create efficiencies in your workflow.
Sure. And I think that, part of what I would say is this also kind of lends to the fact that AI in its different forms, machine learning, et cetera, has been around for a little while. So we do when we harvest our pears, we bring them in two dominant ways that you go and you quote unquote grade a pear to make sure that if it's gift quality or if it goes to we press it into juice. We use an optical defect sorter. The other way that you do it is through manual sortation, where a human actually goes through and sorts through everything. We have gone down the path for many years now to optical defect. A pear goes into a machine and we take 10 black and white and 10 color photos of the pear. And through that, we have algorithms that look at the pictures, the two-dimensional pictures, and are able to, define out what are quote unquote defects, whether it be a puncture, the marring of the surface, a rot, any different of those things. And the algorithm works so that it's not that you have one and you're out, sort of a one strike you're out, but it looks at the combination of different things. And Camise pears, the one type of variety that we grow, is very unique in terms of how you want to grade it. Very different than, let's say, how you would grade a Bosc pear. And so we've kind of built up the algorithm over many years to kind of figure out to optimize. However, in our philosophy, in our logic, you go through an optical defect sorter, you do the algorithm, it spits out and says, here's what's a good pear versus a bad pear. But throughout our whole life cycle, before a pear goes into a gift, there's always a human, one person, who then takes a look at that pear and makes a final judgment. And we purposely do that because our commitment to our customer is to give you the premium pear. And in some years it's a little tougher. We've had some drought years where fruit finish and size were always a problem. We've had last year was a great year. I think this year, while the drought is top of mind, and we're working with the irrigation districts, but we feel like we'll have a good year this year. But Mother Nature has a habit of always changing the rules on you each and every year. And so we use tools like the optical defect sorter to help us through that. With regards to water, again, we've gone through and done a lot of work that, used to be someone would go out and turn on the spigot like your yard and water the orchard. Today, it's fully automated. We do everything through the internet. It's all connected through all of our orchards. We're able to dose that out. And we use a variety of different technologies, overhead sprinklers or drip irrigation, et cetera, so that we can be as efficient and effective as possible with our orchards. And more importantly, what we're finding is that take agriculture, for instance, there's a lot of technology that is now coming into our space from an agriculture perspective. And one of the things that we're challenged with, to be honest with you, is we're producing a lot of data. How much water we're using, where we're using it, the makeup of the orchard, soil moisture content, at different variations of height or depth rather. It's part of what we see, I think, from an AI perspective, is the ability for us to now consume that data and start to look at our orchards differently. Every orchard is different. Every plot of ground is different. You have microclimates, you have different soil types, et cetera. And so for us to be more effective in terms of delivering fertilizer, water, et cetera, to our orchards, we can use that data to make better decisions. And that's really what I'm seeing AI is helping us, is really to get to root causes faster, or root issues faster, but also enabling us to make decisions faster.
Okay, awesome. I just learned, by the way, that unfortunately Grant has been caught up, and so Ned is just using me today.
Right.
Nonetheless, this is great conversation. So, obviously we're the Workforce Board. Ned, you are on
Mm-hmm.
the Workforce Development Board. Thank you for your service there. What do you see in terms of workforce development for Harry and David in terms of this emerging tech? You mentioned you have a lot of data now coming out of the irrigation, the water management that you're doing. I'm sure that means that there's now requirements for data analysts, people with maybe some more kind of specialized skills in terms of that. But even down to I know you use seasonal workers, all of this. Could you tell us a bit about what the workforce development needs are for Harry and David in this kind of era of AI, and maybe what's changed and what hasn't changed, what will still remain the same?
Yeah, I think the easy part is, what hasn't changed. We still harvest pears, which have to be done with labor. We still build baskets, which is done by hand. So there's a lot of that. But we are seeing, as new technologies come in, even some of the things, Mary, I would argue that we're bringing in technologies that are some 20 years old that we bring in to help us with some stuff. And so bringing that in, and when you take some of those older technologies enabled by some of the new technologies, you really start to see some combinations that can drive a business forward. And we're adopting a lot of that in our space. But what we're seeing is that as our workforce is evolving, from the very beginning, if we think about maintenance and repairs and those types of things, used to be that, you would have a work order that would be on a, carbon paper. Now today, everything's on an iPad as we go through computerized maintenance and management sort of systems. So we're managing that. And we're finding is that as new equipment comes online, that new equipment has a different level of technology that's requiring us to upskill some of our teams as we go through. And so we're supporting that. And we're finding that across, not only here in Medford, but across the country. And the need for folks who understand these technologies and how these machines operate is improving. Operators, I think, as we come in, we're putting a big focus on how we train up operators to manage these things. No longer is it just take a label that's printed and put it on a box, but now we're using a system in order to do that. So how to navigate through the different systems, because there are still problems, and that's when a human intervention is required. And having, the teams on the floor who know how to deal with these issues, but more importantly, how to navigate the systems in order to get to the root cause so that they can solve some of these problems is also paramount. And then finally, to your point, I think on the professional side in the office, we're finding a bigger and stronger need for those professional skill sets, reporting, analytics, those types of things is also a big area that we're making some investments in, I think, over the next 3 to 5 years, of how we enable ourselves. Our problem is not data, it's how we utilize the data and make it actionable so that folks on the floor can do their work easier. Part of my job most days is to remove the obstacles, remove the barriers for folks on the floor. I always say that, assembling a gift basket is very easy so long as you have the right product at the right place at the right time. The people who can put those together do wonderful work as part of that. Where we often find that we have the inefficiencies is when something upstream breaks, as a supply chain from bringing product in to making sure that the teams get the order to bring the product to the floor in order to manufacture something. So it's creating the ecosystem from end to end that is more efficient, and being able to use these systems allows you better insight to those different steps.
Yeah, it's really great. I wonder, as you're saying that, does Harry and David, are you investing now, or do you have plans to invest in specialized training to upskill either, for your operations team, maybe for your finance team? Is it do you have a system-wide or an organization-wide approach to that? Or how are you approaching that training and that upskilling as these, tools get smarter and
Yeah, I
faster?
think some of it is, where we work within the community, let's say with the workforce partnership, where, those are certain skill sets that are out there in the industry. But as they come in, there's obviously, as you take what is a broad education and have to, very specific in terms of the systems and the processes that we run on our particular systems. For instance, I know a lot of people who use an ERP, or warehouse management system. Well, once you get into a specific warehouse, the ability to run the specific processes that warehouse set up has to be trained. So we do a lot of that, and it's one of the things is training is always an evolving, and just when you think you got it right, you got to kind of change and you got to evolve, and it's something that we continue to look to improve on, as we bring in, and particularly as we bring in new technologies. You're never done training. It's a constant and evolving practice for us. I like to think that we do a good job, but there's always opportunities for us to improve. But we're finding that training is critical so that as we bring in those professionals to make sure that they're successful.
That's really good. I'd like to open up for the chat. Also, if you have any questions for Ned, and like to know about, anything he's spoken about today or anything, moving forward, please feel free to enter your question in the chat, and we will surely bring it to his attention so that he can answer that directly.
Mhm, mhm.
Another question that we had, Ned, for you was, are there any certifications, any community college programs, or any credentials that you value when you see them on a resume versus ones that really don't move the needle for you? How do you evaluate that when you're looking?
Yeah, I think ultimately, it depends on the position itself. Obviously, we value and have made a lot of investments in the trades, right? Whether I'm an electrician, plumbers, and everything else. Like I mentioned, a lot of the new equipment comes in, and our ability to interface with those new technologies. For instance, we have a lot of HVAC that we have here with cold storage. And, today that is all managed through, control systems. And so we look for a lot of the backgrounds in order to do that. Even some of the, if you think about even our, tractors and different things that we do, so much of that now is computerized. So we look for skill sets in a lot of those areas. As you get into the more professional areas, it's, backgrounds that have experience within, technical environments. So like I mentioned, do you have experience with warehouse management systems? Where we find, and it's not necessarily do you know a specific warehouse management system and how it works, but have you, general awareness of how a warehouse management system works or an ERP and those types of things. That's when we bring them in, and then the job specific training will then say, okay, generally how to get around in a system. Now I can train you specifically to how our processes work and how, the different information flows kind of operate within our four walls. And so we're looking for sort of that general education as people come in, the experience. And a lot of folks won't come in with a formal training, but they'll have a lot of experience that they'll have from other positions and other jobs. So you look for a little bit of both. I think both experience, but also formal training.
That's really good. Thank you. We do have a question in the chat. Looks like Amy is asking, she says, I would like to hear Ned speak about how AI has impacted the sales and marketing end, which is where I come from.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that we are a direct to consumer business. So a lot of most of our sales come in through a website. And so what we find coming through in our marketing stack in terms of how marketing is done, obviously, there's a massive change going on in marketing. As we think about, search, now things are going through, as you go into Google, instead of typing a search, you're going into AI and letting an AI, chatbot go through and, curate, answers for you. On the website itself, if you think about how products is displayed, we're using new algorithms to make sure that, it's personalized to what the user is looking for. So there is a lot of, I think, activities happening in that space in the digital domain that AI is really moving into. I would say probably much faster than what we see in the manufacturing side. Sometimes manufacturing is a little bit slower to the take on some of this stuff, but we are seeing it, take hold in that front end space very rapidly. And I think if you were to take a look at I kind of looked at with a gentleman last week as we were looking at the number of credits we were using in some of the AI platforms in the marketing space was really dominant in terms of what he was consuming in terms of people leveraging and working within the AI space. So, just as kind of a sign of the times.
Thank you for that. And I think there's another question in the chat, which is really maybe the question on everybody's mind, which is, has this reduced the workforce? We like to say that it hasn't reduced the workforce, but it certainly is changing and will change the workforce. So would you agree with that statement, Ned, or how would you frame that?
Yeah, I think as you think about workforce, we've looked at it, whether you talk automation, robotics, AI in the different spaces. I think there are different, levels. I think someone mentioned about the service center, the contact center. I think that's seeing a lot of move towards the service center in the things that you can do. For instance, there's a lot about containment and if someone has a problem with an order, how do I help that customer without actually talking to a person, which is real money, right? Can I actually solve their problems using AI and getting to their problems and getting it solved and ending up with a positive customer experience? But at the end of the day, Harry and David is long. Our customers are type that, a lot of them are much older and like to talk to people. So there are still, real people that on the end of the line that you can talk to. I think it's more of a question of how, as any one of these technologies, like I said, automation, robotics, AI, you will see some job loss. But I think what we're finding is that you'll see job creation in other areas, and particularly as you start to upskill. We not too long ago automated a facility in our network, and what we found was our reduction in reliance on seasonal labor. But what happened is the core labor, the people who were there, not only were still there, but they actually upskilled, and we found that we were able to do a lot more with the workforce that we had. And so a lot of training, a lot of change management went through that, but we felt like we came out much faster. And as a result, we're able to support our customer needs during the holiday in a much more effective, much more accurate way than we've ever had in the history of the company.
That's so good. So my final question for you, and then of course, then anything final thoughts you want to share. But both in your position as the executive or an executive at Harry and David, but also serving on the board of directors at Rogue Workforce Partnership, you're thinking about these kind of large, big picture things that are happening in Southern Oregon and Jackson County specifically, but Jackson and Josephine County. What would you say, given the headwinds, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of changes happening. What would you say is your outlook? Are you an optimist in terms of what you see happening in Southern Oregon? Are you a realist? Like, how would you kind of frame this big picture workforce development kind of book or theme that we're talking about here?
I think generally I would say I'm an optimist. I think there's new technologies coming to light. For instance, we've dabbled in two new technologies where we're seeing AI kind of take hold of, and we've only seen that in recent years. One is vision-based systems. And so this is where we're actually using cameras and how we interpret the videos that are coming in to do different things. So for instance, one of the things that we've just installed in a couple of our buildings is inventory accuracy. Our ability, we actually launch a drone in our warehouses, and the drone will go up with a camera and start to take a picture of the inventory at a position within the racking, and through that actual drone image, we can use AI in the machine learning algorithms to actually read the label. And it goes down to the point, it starts to get smarter and smarter as it understands our labels and how we put it on there and some of the issues and start even some cases where you have shrink wrap, let's say, marring up and not able to kind of read completely. It can flag it and start to intimate what that product is. And so it's reading and learning as it's going through there. The other piece that we also do is we're investigating this is where we take that same image and understanding the box dimensions of how big a box is, length, width, and height. We're able to take a look at that through that image and start to estimate what the number of boxes are on that pallet. So we compare that back to our system that says, hey, there should be 20 boxes on this pallet. We take the drone, take a picture of it, and it says, hey, there's only 15. Now I can flag it and I can identify it as a high risk item. And that goes to our IRA team that sends out a person who goes and does a cycle count on that particular pallet position. Why is that important? Well, so for two reasons. These drones actually work in a freezer and a cooler. And so, as we know, trying to find someone to suffer through many hours a day sitting in a freezer, crawling up and down racks, counting boxes is not the easiest job, and it's not necessarily the job that we've been able to hire for. In addition, the drone can drop rate at any time of the day, and the operator takes it in on a platform and launches it, and it goes and counts, and we probably have a 4x number of counts per hour than an average person can do. So we're able quickly, and when that matters is during the holiday, when our velocity of picking and our ability to get boxes out the door for customers during that holiday period. There's a 2-week period. It's critical that we have the right and accurate inventory in our racks as it is in our system. And so we're able to do that now in a very proactive way and get that. And so that's just an example of how AI, I think, is enabling another new technology that otherwise would not be available to us. So as we start to see this, it kind of goes to the original point that we're able to do this and with our IRA teams, the teams are still there, but now we're making them more effective rather than counting, pallet positions that we already know to be accurate and right. I can go and identify those high risk areas and get to the problem sooner. Because in our world, from a Harry David perspective, on December 18th, for instance, 24 hours is an eternity. And so a lot of things can happen within that 24-hour cycle. And what we find oftentimes is if we get out of position and something happens, if I don't have the right count and I go to that position and I want to pick a box for your grandmother for that one gift basket and it's not there, then bad things happen. So, these are new technologies that I think not only are making our lives more productive, but I think it's resulting in a better customer experience, meaning getting the right product to the right person at the right time. And that, at the end of the day, one of the things that we're looking at from the AI perspective is on these tools is how are we improving the customer experience, even from a manufacturing perspective? How are we creating an environment, a supply chain that ultimately delivers a gift to a customer in a way that we would be proud of delivering something to our own family. And so I think that's really where we are beginning to see, I think, a lot of new technology come on board that is enabling us to do just that.
Okay. Yeah. Here, I thought that Harry and David was a gift manufacturing and pear company, and it turns out you're actually a tech company
Yeah,
in drones and
yeah.
freezers, and
Yes, exactly.
pears are part of it too. All right, so we have more questions. We do have some more time, so if you're open for them, there is a question in here about your own background, Ned, and I'll add to this. So you obviously have been in the manufacturing space or in the executive. You've been in the workforce for a while. I'll say it that way.
Yes, yeah.
But AI, robotics, automation, this is all new. So you've also had to upskill and, broaden your understanding. Could you talk a bit about your own personal experience, both in your career, your education, but then also in this kind of, it's not easy to lead a company and have this major technological change happening at the same time. So what has been your personal experience related to that?
So We've always looked at how we improve operations. My background originally, engineer, undergrad, but I went and got an MBA in finances, another part of it. I actually came to Harry David as the chief financial officer and eventually moved into operations. In my skills as I went in there, I think it's as everybody else. Technology moves so fast. To be an expert in one area, you can be, and there's a lot of great folks out there in my team as well, and they often bring solutions to me about ideas of what do we try this. What I have found is a couple things. Number one, your best talent is the talents that you have, and listen to them. A lot of them are interfacing on the floor, they're interfacing with vendors, and understanding what's out there and listening to them is one source of information. The other one is getting out and working with my peers and seeing what's happening around me. And then finally, I also work with my executive leadership and some of the things that they're seeing and how we want to push into things. Ultimately, my job is to kind of sift through all that, be curious, ask questions, understand what's there and what's not there. But also am a big proponent of back to my original point. Oftentimes someone will come and says, "I found this hammer. Let's go find a nail." And so I'm also stepping back and saying, let's understand what's the problem that I'm solving for, and how do these new sets of tools allow me to go and solve these problems. It's and as you go in, then you get into that process of identifying and evaluating. Do your due diligence. Go through and understand, is this the right tool for what we're looking for? I'm seeing a lot with the AI, a lot of folks spending a lot of money, and we still haven't seen the value really matriculate out of it. I think there's a maturity that's going to happen to this over time. But I am seeing new technologies come in. And part of my job is to figure out, am I going to be an early adopter? Do I wait? And do I adopt it? I was mentioning a couple of years ago, we were installing automation. The automation we're installing was, 20-year-old automation, but it has made a big difference in the combinations of how we put things together and then how we leverage new technologies that come in and help us are really transforming how we go to market with our business and improving, ultimately the customer experience that we deliver. The other piece that, is part of my job is oftentimes we come in here, we find the shiny object that is AI or a new tool, a new process. But at the heart of it, part of what we always preach is that there's somebody, there's a person who has to enact this. There's a person who has to push the button. There's a person who has to do something that nurtures the process. And so change management becomes a big thing that we focus on, Mary, that you can't ignore. Whether I'm installing an ERP, a new process, or a new robot, any of those types of things. We recently put into palletizing lines in our bakery, in our packaging area. And it actually uses AI. It goes through the machine learning and has a vision system that understands where the box is, picks it up, and puts it in a pallet position. We spend a lot of time working with the workforce, and I think as we're better for it, actually the group and the feedback that we've got has been very positive about it. It allows us to focus less on the actual palletization and look other ways at the process to figure out are there other areas that we can make improvements on. It frees people up to go do some of the other things that were more necessary and more value add. And so I think we're starting to see that, but it all starts with the people on the floor and how you engage with them. And so that's very important, whether I'm dealing with, a shop floor or I'm dealing with even an executive team. I've got to manage expectation. I've got to manage change. Change is hard. Everybody tells you, I love change so long as it's happening to him and not me. And so part of that is just working through that. Never underestimate how people will react to this. Go through and work with them.
No, that's really great. You're right. We all hate change as much as we try to think that we are brave in the face of it. It's just a human condition.
Yeah.
There, there's more questions coming in. One, specific, or actually two, about your leadership team. So you mentioned change management.
Uh-huh.
We talked about AI adoption. There's also questions related to AI ethics and governance. What do you see in terms of leadership development in an organization, not just at the executive level, but at all levels of leadership? Are there specific capabilities or new skill sets that you're currently prioritizing when you're looking at those leaders? And then the next question is, what can people do? What can a workforce do to increase their value as a leader so that, for instance, if you have, I don't know if you do, but say you have a director of marketing role open, what is something that will give, a job applicant maybe an edge in the new modern Harry and David that may not have been true 5 years ago, if
Mhm.
anything?
Yeah. Well, I think number one, we're all learning. I think the AI space is rapidly developing, and I think for all of us, we're trying to figure out where do we jump on, how do we get to it, and between using a simple AI platform to write better emails to actually doing more creative work, et cetera, et cetera. To behind the scenes, there's a lot of AI that's embedded in some of the processes that we use, like I mentioned with the process diagnostics and being able to be more proactive. There's a lot of different areas. And so I think from a leadership perspective, it's encouraging and inspiring our leaders to be curious, right? Be inquisitive, that insatiable curiosity. Uh, Seek to learn more, understand, look at all your sources of information that are coming in. And work with those vendor partners, work with those peers who are seeing that. I've seen other companies as well bring more formal training into their four walls. I worked with a vendor who one of the executives came to me and said, I just sat through, 6 hours of AI training. And so I think what I'm finding is different companies are kind of taking a different tact. It's one thing is very clear to me is that, AI is here to stay. And I think as time goes forward, you'll find it, penetrating into different pieces. I had a colleague talked to me yesterday and said, "Hey, I'm looking to use an AI to look at different use cases as it goes to improving workflows, and we're looking for specific use cases that would allow us to test this out." And so, I think for our leadership, it's encouraging those when you get an opportunity like that, and then there's things, take it, right? Let's go after it and let's see what we can do and how we render results out of this. But it's also at the end of the day, it's seeking value, not just doing AI for AI's sake, but understanding and actually driving value. And how do we measure that value? How are we looking at success? What is success? At the beginning of every project, someone comes to me and says, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, whether it be an AI project or a big capital project. One of the first things I'm going to ask them is, well, how would you define success? 1 year from now, after we install this thing, what does success look like? And if you can't answer that, then maybe we haven't done our due diligence in order to move this thing forward. So as any other project, just be curious, find out what it means, um, get into the details. And I think that goes. For someone who is looking to break into any business, I think that's experience, right? In those cases, any opportunity that you may have at your current position or in school or wherever you're doing, every opportunity that you have to kind of build that experience is going to be relevant as you take, your next step in your career. How you either use it actually physically, but also how you, demonstrate sort of that curiosity to kind of dig in and show that you're creating value for your business, for your employer. Those are the things that will make you stand out versus anything else. We see it time and time and again. And so professional credentials are important, and that kind of gets you in the door, but you also have to demonstrate then how do you use that and how do you create? I always say from a leadership perspective, our jobs is really to take our team to another level. How do we improve their work? How do we improve their jobs? I work for the people who work underneath me to make sure that I'm eliminating barriers, making their lives easier. Because when my team can get the job done in an easier, faster fashion, that means the customer's ultimately the beneficiary of this. And that's ultimately, kind of why we're here. We're here to serve the customer.
I love that. Such a great leadership reminder too. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Any final thoughts, Ned, that you'd like to share about this or anything else that's been on your mind that you'd like to share with our audience today?
So I think AI is here to stay. I think what you're going to find is that this is going to evolve rapidly over the next several years. I think anybody who thinks they know AI, there's a lot more to come. I'm still learning for sure, and I would probably argue I'm probably 6 to 8 months behind everybody on this. And so, I think it's part of a leadership perspective is encouraging folks to be curious, to be inquisitive, to find out about it, understand how it may work within your four walls, but also do your due diligence. Like anything else that you're bringing in, a new tool, a process, or people, whether it be consultants or new employees, understand what's the value. Ultimately, how am I driving value? How am I creating value for my customer? That's the important piece. And I think what you'll find is that'll drive most of what you think about, whether it be ethics or, value creation or capital allocation, you name it. There's a lot of ways to look at this, but ultimately it's how we drive value for the customer. Um, Here at Harry and David, I think we're on a good run. I think there's a lot more that we will be able to do across the board. We continue to learn and we will continue to evolve. Kind of a unique model given our high seasonality, which has kind of pigeonholed us into a couple, ways of operating. I once took my team to another. We were visiting another company who's a lot more technologically advanced with my team, and they were looking around like kids in a candy store. I want this, I want this, I want this. And so that's good, so you get them out, start to see kind of how others are doing it. I think collaborations like this, the summer series that you put on to talk about AI, there's so many new tools and venues for us to kind of go through and start to learn and engage with others who are basically battling the same battle that we're going through, and to connect and see how are you adopting AI? How are you putting into place? And so I think there's a lot out there to learn. You just have to be willing to be inquisitive enough to go out and see what those answers are.
It's so good. Thank you, Ned. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for holding the stage. I always love to hear your stories and just what's happening behind the scenes. I think it's really interesting to hear. And to your point, we're all learning together. So thank you for
Mhm,
being our
mhm.
guest today for this AI summer series. Thank you to those of you who joined us and for your really great questions. I think a really interesting conversation. If you missed any of this, or if you'd like to hear some parts of this again, check us out on our socials. We'll be there. We'll put clips of this conversation in our socials, so make sure to check out there. And then also, if my team would put in the chat or put up on the screen the slide, we're sharing a free AI tool from the Department of Labor that will help you take the next step toward an AI-ready America. This is totally free, and you can click that link, explore the resource, and start embedding those capabilities into your daily workflows. Also, stay tuned for other upcoming AI upskilling opportunities, more roundtable series, and workshops coming your way from Rogue Workforce Partnership. And we're holding this every Tuesday this July with different leaders from around Southern Oregon. So join us again next Tuesday at noon. And again, thank you again, Ned. Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you.
wonderful rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.
Bye bye.